Thank you very much. Yeah, we couldn't be here today if it wasn't for the strong collaborations and partnerships. The Latino Commission feels it's part of our DNA to partner with you because we can't do it all. And you've taken the lead on so many of the other issues. We want to partner with you and support you wherever we can. So let's go ahead and get started with some of the legislative and budget overviews. These are going to be kind of quick snapshots of what's going on in the particular areas that's in your agenda. I also want to note that there's a table in your packet that says legislative initiatives impacting the Latino community, and these are only some highlights. There's a tremendous amount of activity actually that's going on this year, and whether we're talking about health, education, economic development, public safety, it all affects the Latino community. So this is by no means a comprehensive list, but it is at least some of the highlights. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started with health and human services. And in terms of health and human services, when it comes to the budget, in terms of the budget, I want to make a distinction between the governor's proposed budget and the not recommended budget. So the not recommended budget that has been introduced assumes that there's going to be a rollback of the income tax and that there's going to be no new revenue to replace that. The governor's proposed budget moves forward with keeping the income tax rate as it is and assuming the revenue will be there to fund these essential services. So if we were to adopt or move forward with a not recommended budget, some of the issues that we would have to deal with in our community overall, this is for the state as a whole, it would mean 16,000 less addiction and preventive treatment services, at least 750 slots for heroin treatment will be removed. When we're talking about mental health services, 140,000 people left without mental health services, or at least reduced services, and 35,000 with complete elimination of those services. 500 people with developmental disabilities would not have access to the kind of community supports they have now. 7,300 developmentally delayed children would not have access to early intervention. We heard at this morning's legislative breakfast what a great program that is for the Latino families in Elgin. That 7,300 would be removed. 600 people with developmental disabilities would not have access to supportive housing. Child care. We know how many slots for child care we'll need in our community. The not recommended budget would cut 23,000 families. That means 41,000 children. How are those families going to get to work or school? How are they going to be able to advance their families? 61,000 women that will be eligible for receiving prenatal care, that will be cut. Almost 14,000 people would not be receiving homeless services. That means 500 homeless youth. And if you think homelessness is not an issue in the Latino community, you're wrong. It's a really big issue. Is Casa Norte here by any chance? Casa Norte in the back representing, thank you. I had a chance to visit Casa Norte and see the wonderful work they do for homeless youth. It boggles the mind that we would have homeless youth in the Latino community, but we do. And the work that they do would be severely impacted if the not recommended budget goes through. On the legislative side, the commission and the caucus have worked together, as well as a lot of other different entities. We have two initiatives that are coming out of the caucus and commission work. One of them is the language access for managed care entities. That's SB 221. And what that does is, as the state is moving into care coordination and Medicaid moves from a model that is fee-for-service and moves into managed care, it says that they too must have a language access policy, that meaningful access to health services and care coordination is not a matter, it's not a favor, it's not a matter even of cultural competence, but it's a matter of civil right. And Representative Soto says it just passed out of committee. It just passed out of committee in the House. Thank you very much. So she was a little bit delayed this morning is because this very important bill was in committee and she knew that she had to be there to champion it. It passed in the Senate, it came to the House, and now it goes to the floor. Yeah. And we hope that it will be pass there as well. Yes, we're very positive.
Hopefully by
that
Friday.
By Friday, okay, good. And that's very significant. The other very significant, and I know so many of you have asked us to do this, we have a House joint resolution that's to develop a one-year task force to look at the issues of Latinos with disabilities. It just continues and continues to be a perennial issue that we just have not been able to wrap our arms around it. So what we've decided to do, the commission will be working with DHS to set up this task force so that we can get to some analysis and some recommendations and hopefully just get to the right system of care and the right kinds of changes that we need to see so that Latinos with disabilities, developmental, intellectual, or physical disabilities have access to those services. And that is now in the Senate. I believe Senator Martinez picked that up as well, and it was championed in the House by Representative Hernandez. We also received from one of our community leaders, Bill HB 4501, which is healthcare access to unaccompanied minors. And that passed in the House, and it's now, actually I think it was heard yesterday at the Senate Judiciary. So hopefully it passed out of committee there and it's making its way to the Senate floor. So 3 bills. We're just highlighting those 3 for you today, but I think they will have significant impact on what happens to the Latino families and what supports are available to them in the future. So that's my brief update on Health and Human Services. I'd like to move now to have our loved colleague, Silvia Puente, who so fearlessly has led the Latino Policy Forum into being such a major powerhouse for policy and strategy for the Latino community. So Silvia Puente, if you can come up and talk about what your analysis and your perspectives on where we are in terms of education. Thank you.
Thanks, Layla. People don't usually call me fierce to my face. But I'll take it. We all have to be fearless, especially when we speak the truth. So good morning. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Silvia Puente, and I am proud to lead the Latino Policy Forum. We are one of the only organization in Chicago that really fosters Latino participation in statewide policy discussions on early education, housing, and immigration. We do so in partnership with many of you in the room, with my colleagues at the table, really with the mantra and the message that Latino success is Illinois success, and that it really is about our shared future. The Latino population has grown to such a point in this state that the state cannot do well unless we do well. So as we continue to advocate for the Latino community, it really is about sharing the message that it is about the shared future for a vibrant Illinois. And it's no longer just Latinos living in Chicago, because the majority of us live outside of Chicago. And in fact, the downstate Illinois population doubled over the past decade. We are everywhere in this state. So our success and the success of the state really are inextricably, can I say that word? Intertwined. So I want to talk to you a little bit about education, and Layla highlighted some of the challenges in health and human services. But many of us in the room really have been long-term advocates in terms of early child education. Research really tells us that there is a 30 million word gap potentially for children who do not receive early education. They will know 30 million fewer words over their lifetime. And we can identify this gap as young as 3 years old. Research tells us that by 3 years of age, too many Latino children already have a 6-month achievement gap by 3 years of age. We heard this morning from the Rockford School District, and they were able to tell us that for Latino children who were enrolled in early education and not enrolled in early education, there was something like a 30% gap in their academic achievement. We know that early education works and is a game changer for the economic success and the educational success of our children. Regrettably, the Illinois Early Childhood Block Grant has been reduced by $80 million over the past 5 years. which means that about 25,000 fewer children are participating in the program than in 2009. And if there are 25,000 fewer children participating, what do we know about the Latino community? Are there more of us or few of us?
More and more.
So what does it mean in terms of our children having access to early education?
Less of them have access.
Fewer of them have access to early education. So we are really concerned about this and know that this budget, all of the issues that we're talking about today, will have a disproportionate impact on the Latino community. This is especially important because statewide now, 1 out of every 4 children under 5 is a Latino child. We're 1 out of every 4. So when I say our success is the state's success, that's so true when we're at 25% of the population. We need more engineers, we need more scientists, we need more students that can stretch the possibilities of tomorrow and even further than what we can grasp today. Most of our children, as we know, are U.S. citizens who will either grow up with the skills necessary to succeed in a knowledge-based economy, or they will remain trapped under a blue-collar ceiling with limited earning potential. We did a report that is online, and we did both a wage gap and an employment gap analysis of both U.S.-born and immigrant Latinos. And what I'm sorry to tell you is that while we saw some improvement over the past decade between our U.S.-born Latinos, it was not what we would have expected. And that too many even of our U.S.-born Latino children are experiencing both that blue-collar ceiling and are disproportionately still in the manufacturing and the service sector, as opposed to being in high-wage STEM careers and other kinds of professional careers. So we know that early education works. We also know that bilingual early education works, and that bilingual education, and in fact dual language, is what we would like to see all of our children growing up in a multicultural, multilingual society, so that truly learning that second language is seen as an advantage as opposed to a disadvantage in society today. So the other part of the education budget that we're very concerned about is bilingual education. And here we know that since 2005, the number of Latino children in English language programs throughout the state has increased by 33%. 1/3. And almost all of that growth is happening outside of Chicago. And I don't know if it's in your packet, but we have a map that basically shows we're in over 80 of Illinois' 101 counties. And that in fact, the number of children in English language learning programs has doubled in most of the counties outside of Chicago over the past decade. We're growing, we're everywhere. Our children need that language support so that they can excel academically. And what is happening? At the same time that the number of English language learners has grown by 33%, the budget for bilingual education has declined in an inverse relationship, unfortunately. While our population has grown, the resources have declined. So the other thing that we would like you to talk to your legislators about today is the need to continue to invest in bilingual education. The state appropriation has remained level at about $63 million since fiscal year 11. But because of the growth, it only equals about $360 per every child in bilingual education. So at the very least, and in the governor's budget, he at least proposed maintaining the bilingual education line item, but we really would like to see that be increased. In order to protect and restore funding for early education, for bilingual education, for all of education, and in any other program, the legislature must maintain the current 5% personal income tax rate. You heard the governor speak about it. It's critically necessary. We're not talking about just cutting here and cutting there. We have already reduced the education budget by almost $1 billion over the past few years. And if we don't have this increase, it would amount to another $600 million in cuts for this next year. We heard this morning from Elgin, which is a school district outside of Chicago that has the largest number of Latino students. The superintendent spoke to us. He said education cuts have cost his school district $24 million over the past few years. And what's really, really unfortunate about this is that in Illinois' time of economic crisis, as we have reduced budgeting for education and funding for education, we have implemented a policy called proration, which disproportionately impacts and takes away more money from those low property wealth, high poverty districts. So we are implementing a policy of inequality. That is not acceptable. So there is a potential solution on the horizon. Senate Bill 16 has been introduced, which would totally reform and restructure the way that we fund education in the state of Illinois. We are working closely with the sponsors of that legislation to make sure that it truly is representative and that it meets the needs of the Latino community, to make sure that our children enrolled in bilingual education do not get shortchanged. But this is probably one of the most critical reforms, in addition to the income tax increase, that we can address this year. And if it doesn't pass this year, we must continue to advocate for next year. And that is Senate Bill 16, because it totally restructures the way we fund school funding in Illinois to make it needs-based, so that the resources go to where the highest need is. Right now, only about half of our dollars are needs-based. The other half are distributed through some other kinds of formula. So it's a pretty complicated bill, but let me share with you that moving forward on Senate Bill 16 is going to be really important for our community. So bottom line, as we look at these issues in terms of education, all of these education policy shifts that I've talked about are important not just for the Latino community, but they're important statewide. We are now at the point where, yes, we will continue to advocate for Latino-specific initiatives, but these greater issues, like restructuring how we fund education in Illinois, is critical to our state's future, to our children's future, to our families' future, and to making sure that our children can grow up to have all of the economic and labor market opportunities which they richly deserve, so they can continue to be contributing members to society. Thank you.